All right, Judges 10, beginning in verse 17. Then the people of Ammon gathered together and encamped in Gilead, and the children of Israel assembled together and encamped at Mizpah. And the people, the leaders of Gilead, said to one another, "Who is the man who will begin the fight against the people of Ammon? He shall be head over all the inhabitants of Gilead." And just to give you an idea of where we're talking about, map's a little bit small, but you can see Gilead right there in the middle. Notice it's on the far side of the Jordan. This is not in Israel, Palestine proper, but across the Jordan in what is present-day Jordan. Grady and I were talking about this earlier, and as you know, he's going in March to Jordan, and one of the places he's looking forward to seeing is that area of Gilead, where our stories are taking place in the area of Jepthah, which we'll talk about today. Zooming in on that particular section, Mizpah is located right there in the red circle, so that's where we're talking about in geography, if that's something that's interesting to you. Now, Jepthah, the Gileadite, was a mighty man of valor, but he was the son of a harlot. And Gilead begot Jepthah. Gilead's wife bore sons, and when his wife's sons grew up, they drove Jepthah out and said to him, "You shall have no inheritance in our father's house, for you are the son of another woman." And Jepthah fled from his brothers and dwelt in the land of Tob. And worthless men banded together with Jepthah and went out raiding with him. And might back up to that bigger map. You notice the land of Tob is up at the very top on the right-hand side. So that's where we're talking about in our context here. What's familiar about verse 3? From what we've talked about last couple of weeks. Remember, a previous judge hired worthless men in order to do his bidding and use money from the temple of Baal to pay them for their deeds. And so this gives us a flavor of who Jepthah is. So Jepthah, he was a mighty man of valor. He's given that. So he was a warrior. He was somebody to be feared. We understand that. But he was the son of a harlot. And so the family, I guess, decided that since he was the son of a harlot, he didn't have any place in their family. And they drove him out and said, "You'll have no inheritance in our father's house, for you the son of another woman." And so Jepthah, shunned by his family, and that's going to come into play as we talk a little bit more about the narrative in just a few verses, because that's going to play an important role in what happens a little bit later on. So what would you say about the character of Jepthah at this point, just from what we know about him?
Not good.
Not good? Okay. What's that? He was a thug. Okay, that's a good way to describe him. Being an outcast, maybe that played into that somewhat. Maybe he, because of being kicked out of his family and forced to live elsewhere, and that soured him on his family, soured him maybe on his relationship with the people, and maybe even the relationship with God. So we don't know what's in his heart, but we have, as we read through this narrative, we're going to figure out kind of what a person he is. It came to pass after a time that the people of Ammon made war against Israel. And so it was when the people of Ammon made war against Israel that the elders of Gilead went to get Jepthah from the land of Tob. And they said to Jepthah, "Come and be our commander, that we may fight against the people of Ammon." And so Jepthah said to the elders of Gilead, "Did you not hate me and expel me from my father's house? Why have you now come when you were in distress?" So they need somebody to fight. And the verse previously, verse 1 said, "What of Jepthah? He was a man of valor." So they went to pick exactly who they knew they needed for this. And was Jepthah justified in his response to them? Yeah, I mean, you kicked me out, and now you want me to come fight for you. What's up with that? What's the problem with that? Why have you come to me now that you're in distress? And this is not what they say, but probably what they could have said is, "We come to you because we're in distress. We need help, and we don't care where that help comes from, even it has to come from you." The elders of Gilead said to Jepthah, "This is why we have turned again to you now, that you may go with us and fight against the people of Ammon, and be our head over all the inhabitants of Gilead." And so the lure they dangled in front of him is, you're going to be the head of the men of Gilead. We're going to bring you back. We're going to give you a position of authority, a position of rank. And so Jepthah said to the elders of Gilead, if you take me back home to fight against the people of Ammon, and the Lord delivers them to me, shall I be your head? And the elders of Gilead said to Jepthah, the Lord will be our witness between us if we do not do according to our words. And then Jepthah went with the elders of Gilead, and the people made him head and commander over them. And Jepthah spoke all this word before the Lord in Mizpah. All right, so we're talking about kind of what a rascal he is and what a thug he is. But notice there in verse 9, Jepthah said to the elders of Gilead, if you take me back home to fight against the people of Ammon, and the Lord delivers them to me, shall I be your head? So Jepthah, can we say, wasn't all bad? I mean, he seems to be recognizing the Lord's involvement in this. And I guess the lesson that I'd like for us to think about is, we have people that we know who are not Christians, who are not faithful to the Lord. Maybe we have people who were once faithful to the Lord, now they're not faithful to the Lord. And don't we tend to characterize them as being all bad? I mean, not always, but that's a tendency, perhaps. And so, again, I don't know, maybe making too much of this, but at the same time, Jepthah's acknowledging the Lord. And in verse 11 there, Jepthah spoke all his words before the Lord in Mizpah. And so there's a part of him that still has that connection with God. And part of that is in his psyche and his makeup, and why he hasn't lost that, we don't know. But even though he's kind of a, I don't want to say Jekyll and Hyde character, but there's two sides to this guy. And so at least he's got that statement there, if the Lord delivers them to me. Elvin?
I think it's interesting because being a man of valor has a lot to do with who you are and how you trust God, because like David's men of valor, they were very, concerned about God being a part of their life, because he delivered them from those battles where they fought. Mm-hmm. So when you're, let's say, a soldier and you're in Christ, or you have God with you, that you see it in your life, like every time I've been in trouble, guess who's been there for me? God has. I may not have been praying like I should or whatever, but I know he's there.
Yeah. So he's got some connection there, and we'll talk more about this because things get a little interesting later on in the narrative here. Yeah. Yes?
Gilgal was his father, so some of them rubbed off on him.
Yeah.
They just hate him because he wasn't from the same.
Yeah.
They judged him to be all this. He was a great warrior. But Gilgal was his dad, so some of that.
So he can thank his lineage for why he had this amount of faith in that process, right?
I think it's a testament to his faith that even though he's a pagan, the Bible doesn't make him out to be a scoundrel. It makes him out to be a mercenary, like he can, and he still hasn't lost his faith in God, even though his people turn their back on him, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that's.
Yeah. In the case of Gideon's kids, what was the relationship between them? You had one rise to power, and what did he do to all his brothers? He killed them. Okay, Jepthah hadn't done that. He's a mighty man of valor. It would have been perhaps easy for him to go back home and say, okay, you drove me out. Here's the consequences of that. But he doesn't do that. He doesn't take that step against his own family at that point in time. So again, there's something about him, and I guess the lesson that we need to draw is there's always good in somebody. Sometimes you have to look real hard to find it. Sometimes it may be a tiny little corner of their brain, but everybody has good, and everybody has something worth redeeming in them. And so when we give up on people and say, well, I'm not going to preach them the gospel because it's not going to do any good, how do we know it's not going to do any good? That's the point. Our point is not to judge the worthiness of the recipient of the gospel. Our job is to preach the gospel. To who? Everybody. Everybody. And it's interesting sometimes that the people who respond to the gospel are the people you would least have thought would have done that. You think, I've never seen that person obeying the gospel, and yet they become a faithful Christian. And I've seen that in my life, and you've probably seen it in yours. People who, that person would never embrace Jesus. And yet they're the most faithful person in the church, perhaps, because of the change that the gospel wrought in their lives. And so the point is, I guess we should, again, part of our discussion here in our class is remembering what the modern day application for this. A lot of things happen here that are outside of our history, outside of our purview, don't directly relate to what we're going on, but there's lessons we can learn that are just as applicable today. And one of those is kind of that old phrase, don't judge a book by its cover, because you just never know how the gospel might penetrate that person. Again, Paul, when he was known as Saul, Ananias was eager to preach to him the gospel, wasn't he? He questioned God and said, don't you know who this is? Don't you know what he's done? And God said, God didn't explain, he just said, go, for he's chosen vessel of mine. And he's going to be the one who teaches the Gentiles. And so Saul is a perfect example of somebody who nobody would have thought he would accept the gospel. But he did. Of course, he had help. He was blind for 3 days, and the light on the road to Damascus and all that. But still, he embraced it and became one of the most prolific missionaries probably in the history of the world. And again, coming from a place where if you and I had been looking at it, we would have said, nah, never happened. Couldn't happen. Won't happen. And so I think that maybe is a good lesson for us in this. Now Jepthah sent messengers to the king of the people of Ammon, saying, what do you have against me that you've come to fight against me in my land? And the king of the people of Ammon answered the messengers of Jepthah, because Israel took away my land when they came out of Egypt, from the Arnon as far as Jabbok and to the Jordan. Now therefore restore those lands peaceably. That's his excuse. That's his reason. Notice what Jepthah says. Jepthah sent messengers to the king of the people of Ammon and said to him, thus says Jepthah, Israel did not take away the land of Moab, nor the land of the people of Ammon. For when Israel came up from Egypt, they walked through the wilderness as far as the Red Sea and came to Kadesh. Then Israel sent messengers to the king of Edom, saying, please let me pass through your land. But the king of Edom would not heed. And in like manner they sent the king of Moab, and he would not consent. So Israel remained in Kadesh. So, king of Ammon said, yeah, you took our land. Jepthah said, no, we didn't. We respected your borders when we came through because that's what God had told them to do. And so as they were wandering in, going to take the land, if the people wouldn't allow them through, then they went around. They did something else because God had told them, leave these certain people alone for now and don't deal with them. And they went through the wilderness and bypassed the land of Edom and the land of Moab, came to the east side of the land of Moab and encamped on the other side of the Arnon. But they did not enter the border of Moab, for the Arnon was the border of Moab. Then Israel sent messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, the king of Heshbon, and Israel said to him, please let us pass through your land in our place. But Sihon did not trust Israel to pass through his territory. So Sihon gathered all his people together and camped in Jahiz and fought against Israel. So again, Israel, as they were coming up out of the land of Egypt and out of their wilderness wanderings, they weren't very welcome. Why do you think that was? Reputation, yeah.
To have too many people walk through the land.
Sure, yeah. The estimate given that there could have been upwards of 2.5 million people in Israel at that time. And you've got that size force walking through. And again, remember that map up there. We're not talking about the size of Texas. We're talking small areas. You can walk across them in a day or two, north to south. The land of Israel is a small land. It's compact. And all those places are fairly close to each other. And so for 2.5 million people to come in, and if they decided we're going to take this, what would they do? They'd take it. And so you can understand the kings here who say, yeah, I don't think so. Don't come through because that's just dangerous. It's what?
Inviting trouble.
Inviting trouble. So we get that and understand that. But again, the king here is trying to use an excuse that you took our land, and Jepthah said, no, we didn't. Redempta? Okay. Well, it's, yeah, but if, well, let's just say, use this as an example. China wants to attack Russia, just picking countries here. And China says, we figured out that it would be easier for us to come through Europe and then across the United States of America to get to Russia. Wouldn't work that way because of the geography. But what do you think our country would say to the Chinese army? Yeah, not in this lifetime, you're not. Not going to do it. So it's a matter of practicality for these people. They see this huge group of people. John mentioned their reputation of what they'd already done, and they said, no, we're not going to do that. And so they even fought against Israel. And again, fought against Israel when they really didn't need to, because they were just going to go around. And the Lord God of Israel delivered Sihon and all his people into the hand of Israel, and they defeated them. Thus Israel gained possession of all the land of the Amorites who inhabited that country. They took possession of all the territory of the Amorites, from the Arnon to the Jabbok, from the wilderness to the Jordan. Now why did they get to attack this king? Because he attacked them, didn't he? Whereas the others said, no, you can't pass through. They didn't respond militarily, but this king did, and so I said, okay, I guess, I'm assuming here, okay, you're going to attack us, you're fair game now for this. And so they took all the possession of the territory. And now the Lord God of Israel has dispossessed the Amorites from before his people Israel. Should you then possess it? Will you not possess whatever Chemosh your God gives you to possess? So whatever the Lord our God has taken possession before us, we will possess. And now, are you any better than Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab? Did he ever strive against Israel? Did he ever fight against them? Well, Israel dwelt in Heshbon and its villages, in the Aurora and its villages, and in all the cities along the bank of the Arnon for 300 years. Why did you not recover them within that time? So Jepthah is saying, basically, your argument's flawed. You had, if it's your land, you've had 300 years to take it back, and you haven't, which says something about your claim on it. And so, no, we're not going to allow that to happen. And here's the big part, verse 24. Whatever the Lord our God takes possession of before us, we will possess. We're doing this because our God told us to do this. We're being faithful to him, and if he says it's our land, it's our land. And we're not going to change and give it up. And then there's that dig. Remember when Gideon cut down the statue of Baal? And they were all up in arms about that? What did Gideon's father say to him? Yeah, go talk to your God. Let him fight for you. Why are you defending your God? If he's a God, he doesn't need defending. And so here's another dig at this God Chemosh. Whatever your God gives you to possess, you possess. But he's not going to give you this land because our God said no to that. John?
And reminiscent of Elijah on the mount where he said the prophets of Baal, he might be sleeping. Where is he?
Elijah dug at them. He's gone on a trip. Maybe he's asleep. Shout a little louder and wake him up. And that just another proof of the fact that there was no God Baal, because there's no such thing. There's only one God. So, back and forth. And you notice these are sending messengers back and forth. So I don't know how long this took to transpire, but it obviously wasn't by email and instantly off. So they're going back and forth, having to travel, take the message back, and then take the other message back. And so this is going to take a little while for this to go on. Here's a picture that I found on the internet of archaeologists who thinks what their god Chemosh looked like. And there are several different renderings of this. Here's another one that's said to be the god Chemosh. Here's yet another one, the warrior god Chemosh. Here's yet another one. Again, these are just pictures I found on the internet when doing a search of that. And there's yet another one. So, maybe he looked different in every generation or whatever the case may be, but this is evidently the God that we're talking about. And keep this in mind because this is going to be important in just a few verses. Human sacrifice is part of this religion. So keep that in mind because that's going to come up in a little bit. Yes?
The same story is in Numbers 21.
Uh-huh.
That's a repeat.
Yeah, repeat. Story told again in here. So exactly. All right. Anything else? And now the Lord God of Israel has dispossessed the Amorites. Oh, I already read that. Therefore, I have not sinned against you, but you wronged me by fighting against me. May the Lord, the judge, render judgment this day between the children of Israel and the people of Ammon. However, the king of the people of Ammon did not heed the words which Jepthah sent him. So again, nothing's getting better. It's back and forth, and they're not happy with each other. And again, the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jepthah. What does that mean? We've heard that in other places in the Old Testament.
Judgment.
Okay. Judgment in the sense of God approving of him. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him. Wasn't that a sign of power? A sign of approval? The ability perhaps to do something that maybe they couldn't do. So I don't want to say that God possessed Jepthah, but he sent his Spirit so that Jepthah would do what he needed to do and could do what he needed to do in this process. And he passed through Gilead and Manasseh and passed through Mizpah of the Gilead. And from Mizpah to Gilead he advanced toward the people of Ammon. And Jepthah made a vow to the Lord and said, if you will indeed deliver the people of Ammon into my hands, then it will be that whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me, when I return in peace from the people of Ammon, shall surely be the Lord's, and I will offer it up as a burnt offering. Now, y'all know the rest of the story, don't you? What do you think? I don't have an answer for this either. What do you think prompted him to say and make that vow? Jim?
I don't know. He said coming out of my house. A dog or a pig ain't going to be coming out of his house.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, was he thinking about what might come out of his house when that happened? I don't know. John?
And vows are not unusual in situations like this. But as Jim said, out of my house.
Yeah. It was very specific to what would come out of his house. And I think this section of Scripture is interesting in the sense that it troubles us, doesn't it? Especially when we get down to discussing, did he actually do it? We'll get there, hopefully, before time our class is over this morning and talk about that. So, maybe it was in his exuberance. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him. He knew he was going to be victorious, and I'm going to win, and I've got to do something about that. And so he makes this, what we would call probably a rash vow. Wouldn't you say that?
Yeah.
He made this rash vow because he was so ready to fight, so ready to go, that maybe his exuberance got the best of him. I don't know. Glenn?
He has seemed real intelligent and all when he's dealing with that king, and then he makes this absurd.
Yeah. We've never done anything like that, have we? We look at Jepthah and say, how in the world could you do that? Because we know the consequences of that. But we do things like that as well. We make silly decisions and unthought through decisions. We do something and we don't realize the unintended consequences that are going to go with that. And sometimes we're stuck with those unintended consequences because of a decision or a vow, if you want to call it that we made. And we hadn't thought it through perhaps, or maybe it was something that you couldn't think through and see that particular outcome from that. And so, again, if he had asked God, if you give me into the hand, what can I do for you to acknowledge that? That would have been much better, wouldn't it? Then God could have said, you do this, eternal loves, and firstborn calf, or whatever God would have said in that context. Then Jepthah would have known that that's what God wanted. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking we're a living sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
So how many times are there things in our lives that we want so bad, and then God says, no, I'm number one.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, the things that we love, sometimes we have to sacrifice to God. And Jepthah, maybe in his mind, when he thought of something coming out of his house, he was thinking about his most important possession was his daughter.
Okay, could be. He could have had that in his mind all along. I don't know. The text doesn't give us enough information to say, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. We just know he made this vow, and we know what the outcome is going to be, and we can't figure out the intervening spaces. John?
I think this is kind of a reach, but Brady's sermon on Christmas Day, December 25th,
discuss the construction of a home in the days of Jesus. And the cat in the winter, the cattle would be on the first floor, sheep primarily, and then the family would be on the second floor, and that heap would rise. Maybe he thought, as someone said a moment ago, some animal would come out of that first floor.
It could have been, and if you read the commentaries on this, a lot of them will go down that path and say, well, the construction of the house there would be a barn area, an area where the animals were, and so maybe he was thinking that when he got home that a goat would come out or a calf would come out, and that's what he would sacrifice, not ever thinking that it would be his dog. Rudy.
When he said whatever, he more or less understood whatever meant. Anything.
Yeah.
Including his family. He didn't expect them.
No.
But when he made that promise, whatever meant anything.
Anything, exactly.
Not just a pig, a goat. He said whatever, and that whatever included
everything, yeah. Whatever comes out of my house.
Yeah.
What if there had been a neighbor that came out of his house?
Also, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Robert?
I've been waiting to ask this question for a long time in my study as a new Christian. Did he sacrifice his daughter as a burnt offering?
Hang on to that question because we're going to jump into that in just a little bit. Because that's the question you got to answer. Did he do it? Yeah. And we'll see. Savannah?
It's just an interesting contrast between Jepthah and Hannah and her prayer and her vow to the Lord. Hers was not a burnt offering, and instead vowed an entire life to the Lord. But it's in the same way a vow, but just made me question is Jepthah's more of a this or that? If I give you this, you'll give me that, which is actually trusting in God.
Yeah. Okay, so Savannah has a good point that Hannah said, if you'll give me a son, what will I do with him? I'll dedicate him to the service of the Lord. That's a whole different ballgame than a burnt offering, isn't it? And so but then was that what Jepthah was thinking, or was it again, some of the commentators say that Jepthah, yes, he believed in God, but he had a little doubt and was hoping that this grand display of willingness to sacrifice whatever came out of his house would push things over the edge and so that he would be victorious in all that. And again, we're just speculating here because the text doesn't tell us anything that would give us an indication of what was going on in his mind when he made that vow. And again, what's the lesson for us today? Don't make vows. Yeah, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Don't do that. Go ahead.
Whatever and whoever are two different things. And so I don't think I can remember any legitimate sacrifice of a human ever in the Bible. And yet we know what happened. So we wonder why that was allowed to happen.
Yeah, and again, this John Erickson and I were chatting about this a couple of 3 weeks ago, and John, I can't wait for you to get there and explain all this to us. And sorry, that ain't going to happen because I don't know. But it's a troubling passage, isn't it? Especially if we come to the conclusion that he did offer her as a burnt offering. How does that work in the overall scheme of things? Calf, cow, goat, whatever. That's part of their culture. We understand that. But human sacrifice has never been acceptable to God. And even, you say, well, let's go back to Isaac, Abraham and Isaac. Well, I don't think God ever intended for Isaac to be sacrificed. He just wanted to see what Abraham would do. And Abraham raised the knife to do it, and that's when he stopped. So, again, we've got to keep all that in mind. Any other thoughts, comments? Glenn?
It seems as though God is still with him in the later verses whenever Ephraim comes up against him.
Yeah.
Whatever he did, maybe it wasn't something that offended God.
Okay. Again, Glenn makes the point that maybe this wasn't something that had offended God because God was still with him. God was still working through him. Redempta?
But it does say that he would offer it.
Yeah, it would offer it. So is that just the wording, or does that give us a hint into what he was thinking that would come out of his house? I'd like to know the answer to that too, but I don't.
John's explanation, his reminder of the way Brady played out that house
Yeah.
was real good.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I think most of the commentators and people who write about this gravitate toward that being his intention. I'll offer this animal, whatever comes out of my house, and that's going to be my sacrifice to God, not thinking perhaps about what might come out. And so his intention was, I'll make a burnt offering. Again, the text just doesn't give us enough information to say and pound the pulpit that's what he was thinking. Flo?
Kind of put it a little simpler. I mean, think about, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you will find out later in the scripture what the promise he made.
Yeah.
Which he hadn't.
Right. Be careful for what you wish for. It's again, when we're making vows, like Jepthah was, there is always that possibility that I'm doing it to, maybe this will sound a little harsh, be manipulative. I'm going to manipulate God into doing what I want him to do by offering this grand gesture. And God would say, just obey me. That's all I want. Just obey me. In fact, there are times when they were offering sacrifice, he said those sacrifices wear me out because your heart's not in it. Marcia?
And God's in control anyway.
Exactly.
So he could have controlled any situation.
Sure. Yeah. And that's going to beg the question, then why did he allow Jepthah's daughter to come out rather than the pig or whatever the case may be? Yes, Rudy?
Why would an animal come out to meet him?
Okay.
Look like it'd be a family member who's coming from war.
Could be. Yeah.
Why would an animal, sheep, goat, come to meet him? It'd be somebody from his household. Anyone.
Yeah.
Son, wife, this time it was the daughter. But why would an animal come to meet him?
Okay, that's a good point. Good point. Unless it was the puppy dog or kitty that was glad to see him home, whatever the case may be. But again, this is one of the things that I'll speak for me. My curiosity gets the better of me, and I want to know something I can't know. And it frustrates me. Doesn't it frustrate you when you can't answer those questions? But we have to understand that God gave us the information we needed to have, and we've got to be content with that. Rick, go ahead.
So God could have controlled what came from the door.
Yeah.
Probably did.
Okay, yeah. So did God make it happen this way? I'm waiting for an answer. Someone come on.
Well, another quick thing too, if being raised on a farm and having animals, believe me, when you come home from someplace, if there's a sheep or a goat or an animal that likes you, they come.
Okay. Or if it's feeding time, you've all the communities I lived in until we moved here were rural communities, and you go out with a farmer, and he gets that pickup in the pasture with hay in the back. You better not get out of that truck because those cows will trample you to death because they know what's coming. So here they come. So maybe that's part of this discussion. I don't know. I would love to have the answers that I just don't have with this. So Jepthah advanced toward the people of Ammon to fight against them, and the Lord delivered them into his hands. And he defeated them from Aroer as far as Minnith, 20 cities, and to Abel-Kiramim, and with a very great slaughter. Thus the people of Ammon were subdued before the children of Israel. And so, before we get to the vow, before he comes home to whatever comes out of his house, he's got to finish the battle. He does that. The Lord delivers them into the hands. The text specifically says, wants to know that it was the Lord's battle, not Jepthah's battle that won. And when Jepthah came to his house at Mizpah, there was his daughter coming out to meet him with timbrels and dancing, and she was his only child. Besides her, he had neither son nor daughter. And it came to pass when he saw her that this probably gives us an indication, a little bit of what he was thinking earlier. He tore his clothes and said, Alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low. You are among those who trouble me, for I have given my word to the Lord, and I cannot go back on it. So if I'm going to be forced into a position on what he was thinking, that verse there in verse 35 suggests to me that he wasn't thinking his daughter would be the one that came out. Again, couldn't prove that, but obviously the response he gives indicates that's not what he was expecting. He was expecting something else. something that wouldn't be his only daughter. But, again, had he not made that vow to begin with, we wouldn't even be talking about this. But he did for whatever reason. And now the question arises, what happens next? And again, notice the wording there. For I have given my word to the Lord, and I cannot go back on it. So again, we're talking about the character of Jepthah, and he's got this mindset somehow that I told God I could do this, and I'm not going to go back on it. I can't go back on it because I said I would do this. Pam,
I have a note that it's a symbolic sacrifice.
Okay.
All her companions are bewailing the fact that she's always going to be a virgin. Mm-hmm. She can never get married and have children. So could it be that he sacrificed her to go to work in the temple and be one of the temple ladies?
That's one of the theories. The other theory is he did what he said he would do, and she was a sacrifice.
Could you repeat that, Kevin?
I said...
No, what Pam said.
Pam said that she had notes in her Bible that said that it was a symbolic sacrifice, that she was like she'd been given to the temple, kind of like Samuel was, and lived out her days in her virginity and all of that. And that certainly, you read the commentaries and people who talk about this who know more than I do, and several of them will go down that road and say this is a possibility of how that worked. Others will say no, he promised to offer as a burnt offering, and that's what he did. The text doesn't tell us what he did per se. So she said to him, my father, if you've given your word to the Lord, do to me according to what has gone out of your mouth, because the Lord has avenged you for your enemies, the people of Ammon. And then she said to her father, let this thing be done for me. Let me alone for 2 months, that I may go to wander in the mountains and bewail my virginity with my friends and I. So, Jephthah's daughter says, do to me what has gone out of your mouth. Think about that. My kids would have probably said, that's the deal you made. I had nothing to do with it. And I'm not going to do that. But she didn't. Her response was, whatever's come out of your mouth, that's what you need to do, because the Lord has given us a victory. What an astounding thing to think about her faith in all of this and her response to all of this. If it had been me, I'd already been out the door heading for some other town, because I don't want to be sacrificed that way. John?
A good word to use here is her character.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Her father had made a vow. She had nothing to do with that vow. But since her father had made that vow, she was going to honor it, and said to him he needed to honor it. So again, that tells us a little bit about her. And again, it tells us a little bit about Jepthah, that this is his daughter speaking and doing this. So when we look at Jepthah, and yeah, he made a rash vow, and yeah, he was kind of a reckless fella, and all of that, there was still a part of him that was faithful. A part of him that trusted in the Lord and knew that if we have victory in this battle, it's going to be because of the Lord and not because of me. So you got to keep that in mind about this individual, even though we can't figure out why he would make such a vow. Clem?
One thing, she's not concerned about losing her life. She's concerned she won't ever get married.
Yeah. Life didn't seem to matter. I'm just not going to have kids. And of course, in that culture, what was women having kids? That was the be-all and end-all of everything. That's why Hannah, as we mentioned her earlier, was so distraught, because she couldn't have kids. And in that culture, that was frowned upon, it was looked down on. You weren't fulfilling your role as a woman if you couldn't do that. And so for her, this was a big deal. And Jephthah's only daughter, if she dies, what happens to his lineage? It's gone. It's done.
What happens to his marriage?
Yeah. What happens when his wife hears about this? It smothers him with a pillow in the middle of the night for doing that. So it's, again, this, in a bigger context, this is a big deal. What's going on here? It's not just a nice side story. It's a big deal. Rick?
If you don't have a son, you're going to lose your lineage anyway.
Yeah. But what will happen under the law of Israel at that point in time, another family member would take the daughter, have children by her that would be in the name of the father. It's the Levirate marriage setup that we read about. And so the lineage would go on in the land ownership, but there wouldn't be a direct son, from David to Jesus kind of thing. Go ahead, Glenn.
In the next verse there, it seems like she honors his vow.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
she'd have to be alive.
Okay, all right. Let me go and bewail my virginity, my friends and I. And she said, go. And he sent her away for 2 months. And he went with her to his friends and bewailed her virginity on the mountains. And so it was at the end of 2 months that she returned to her father and carried out his vow to which with his vow with her which he had vowed. She knew no man, and it became a custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went 4 days each year to lament the daughters of Jepthah the Gileadite. Clears it all up, doesn't it? No. Doesn't seem to. So, I guess here are the issues. If God had allowed Jepthah to offer her as a burnt offering, how does that square with pretty much everything else we read about in the Old Testament? Well, God's never wanted human sacrifice. He's never approved of it. And so as a result of that, that would be out of character. But then at the same time, he offered this vow, and he had to do this vow. Could God have allowed that to happen? The answer to that is yes, he could have allowed that to happen. The question is, did he? What exactly happened here? And that's where we kind of hit a brick wall to say, because we don't know. Some of that indicates maybe she did live on, because it says she knew no man. So maybe she did live on in her virginity. But then at the same time, she had said, do to me as you said you would. Rick, and then Flo.
You think that with a sacrifice like that we would at least learn her name.
Yeah.
And yet?
Yet there's not. She's Jepthah's daughter. That's all we know her by. Good point. Flo?
Knowing that God is all knowing, you have to know in his heart.
Yeah.
And he negotiated with God. He said, I'll do this if you do this for me.
Mm-hmm.
Not knowing that it's going to be his daughter at
Yeah.
risk. And I think God knew that already.
Sure.
Her promise to do what she did, to get away and not die, was to him, not to God.
Yeah.
So it was from human to human.
Yeah.
It's a difference.
Yeah, and again, I would love to be able to answer this one and say, this is what happened. And you can take that to the bank. But we can't do that because it's just ambiguous enough that it might have happened, it might not have happened. And, we often talk about once we get to heaven, we're going to have some questions. Maybe that's going to be one of your questions when you get there. What happened there? I'd like to know. All right, we're out of time. Appreciate your participation this morning. We'll pick up there, Lord willing, next Sunday morning.